Thank you very much. So good afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much for taking the time to be here. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Miriam. I am one member of the Extensive Planning Committee, who you will meet shortly, and some who are staying behind the scenes. We are really excited to be here today to host what is hopefully the first of many seminars to introduce you all to St. Athanasius Orthodox Academy. You may notice that we are recording the session, so if as you're listening, you're thinking, oh, I wish I had told so-and-so to be here, they would love this. Don't worry, we are going to have a very professional looking presentation that will be posted, so you're welcome to share this with anyone who you think might be interested. And with that, we will jump right into the agenda. So I will be starting with a brief introduction about who we are and how this seed got planted. I will then hand it over to Father Timothy to give you some background about why we chose St. Athanasius as the patron saint for our school. Polina will then be taking the bulk of our time today to take us on a very exciting journey into the world of Orthodox classical education. I was trying to summarize this in a sentence. I really couldn't do it, so I'm just going to leave it at that because it is just too rich to try to say anything else about it. And then we will invite Father Paul to help us understand the relationship between the parish and the school, God willing. After all of that, we will be talking a bit about next steps and most importantly, how all of you can be getting involved. So stay tuned for that at the very end. So who are we? So about 6 months ago, I had absolutely no clue what classical education was, let alone Orthodox classical education. All I knew was the traditional education system that many of you may also be very familiar with. You have a child, you tell them to go to school, to work really hard, get good grades, you apply to a good university, you get into that, you finish the program, you graduate, you apply to a great job, you get a great job, and then you live happily ever after. And that is sort of all we know for the most part. And while there's nothing specifically wrong with that approach, it is lacking something. And that's what this world is hopefully going to introduce you to. So one of the things that we always thought of education as is just like a means to an end. We're just going through this process to reach a goal, and once that goal is reached, there isn't really a love for learning that's developed. And that is a huge lack in our current education system. Not to mention the fact that the most exposure to God that you would ever see, even in most Catholic schools, is limited to a religion class, maybe a prayer in the morning, and that's about it. There seems to be this major disconnect between education and church. There's no integration of faith into the church, into the school. There's no kind of a knowing of God that is prioritized. And so when Bishoy and I became parents, we started talking and thinking about, what would be the ideal for our child? What would we want? How would we want him to learn? How would we want his education to be shaped? And, how great would it be if there was a school that not only integrated faith, but also the teachings of the church and the life of the church? And so while we thought this was sort of just like a pie in the sky idea, little did we know that Polina's wheels had been churning about this for many, many, many years. And very serendipitously did she approach us one day and say, hey, what if we started a school? And we were like, oh, what kind of school? And then she started telling us all about Orthodox classical education. And it sounded amazing. And we thought, oh, okay, well, we're just going to be the first ones to do this. Well, no, not really. They're all over the world, actually, except, of course, in Canada. So there is not a single Orthodox classical school in Canada. And I won't steal Polina's thunder too much, but she'll tell you a lot more about that in a bit. But, in that one conversation, we started imagining a world in which education was integrated with faith, church, and prayer, and that the goal of this school would be to teach our children to know and love God as the highest priority. So Soon after that conversation, and as Polina was spreading the word to a number of other people, with the support of His Eminence Metropolitan Gregory, a working group was formed, which includes, of course, our beloved fathers, who you will be hearing from very shortly. And here we are. So ultimately, our goal is to build a school that serves our children and provides a learning environment that is ordered towards God first and foremost. Now, with all of that being said, we just want to say up front that we imagine that you will all have really good practical and logistical questions for us, and we likely won't have too many answers for you today. You might be thinking, where's the school going to be? How many kids do we need to start the school? What age group are we looking at? And while we have a lot of ideas about how to answer these questions, we're hoping that actually your input is what's going to help us answer those questions. So that's really why we're here. We want to share the beauty of what an Orthodox classical education could look like, and really get you guys all involved in the early planning stages. And at the end of this presentation, we will tell you exactly how you can do that in a variety of ways.
This is a beautiful segue into my part, and hopefully I can tell you a little bit today about what Christian classical education is, and we'll see what you think of it. Let's just do that. So, just to take a stab at it, I would imagine that most of you are here because you are dissatisfied with the way that children are being taught. I think that's a safe assumption. So am I. We run a homework club every Monday here at the church, and I see kids in 3rd, 4th, 5th grades who were never taught how to hold a pencil, who are struggling with basic multiplication and spelling, who have a hard time figuring out where the continents are in relation to each other. They don't like reading, except for comic books and graphic novels. They struggle with discipline. They have a hard time focusing on a task for longer than a few minutes at a time. These are very bright kids, and they attend highly ranked public schools. They just haven't been taught. Why is this? What is preventing schools from educating children better? Why are university professors complaining that they are reteaching high school skills to undergraduate students, including essay writing and reading comprehension? More worryingly, why do so many children disengage from learning and put in just enough effort to get a good enough grade? I would argue that a big reason for this is that schools have the wrong goals. So on this slide, the next one, you will see some mission and vision statements from some of the larger Ontario school boards, as well as one very prestigious public school. We've got the TDSB at the top, Peel District School Board, Toronto Catholic District School Board, and the University of Toronto Schools. I know you can't read this very clearly, but they all work towards goals like academic excellence, achievement, skills, knowledge, careers. These goals are very concrete, and progress towards them can be, arguably, easily measured. Academic excellence, skills, knowledge, and the like can be assessed through standardized testing, right? EQAOs, things like that. Dynamic future is what Peel School Board promises, and a good career can be fairly accurately predicted through university acceptance rates. Because progress towards these goals can be measured, there's always relentless pressure on schools, teachers, and students to score better, to have better stats. And so we get a smorgasbord of initiatives and a disjointed and haphazard curriculum that changes every few years. Let's have cell phones in the classroom. No, that was a bad idea. How about trauma-informed education, STEM activities, STEAM activities, back to basics, social emotional learning, fidget spinners for everyone. The TDSB actually did that some years ago. What else can we try? When the goal of education is getting students into universities or putting them on a path to a good career, it is really tempting to latch on to the next hot thing that promises to boost their performance. There are many problems with this approach. One of them is the fact that it doesn't evidently work very well. But I think the worst one is that kids quickly realize that schools care most deeply about grades and university acceptance rates. And then many of them, perhaps most of them, will think that education really is all about grades and university acceptance and getting a good job. And I think that's awful. I don't mean that going to university or securing a well-paying position is bad, but these should definitely not ever be the goal of education. Because if education is about grades and jobs, why bother learning things that are not evidently useful? No wonder children often ask, very reasonably, why do I have to do algebra anyway? I'm never going to do it again once I graduate. Why bother learning things really well? Why not just stop at good enough? Good enough to pass, good enough to get into university. What satisfactory response can one give from the point of view of the utilitarian goals of the school system? Is there any other way to conceive of education, though? I'm glad you asked. Yes, there is, and it's gaining momentum with every passing year. Since the 1980s and 90s, there has been an accelerating revival of so-called classical education that traces its roots to ancient Greece and Rome, based on the liberal arts. Though there are lots of secular classic schools, the majority of the early adopters and the most fervent supporters of this revival have been Christian parents and schools, for reasons that will become clear as I go through this presentation. And so, in the past 40 years, there have been hundreds of Christian classical schools established all over the world. Most are Protestant or pan-Christian, some are Catholic, but there are a number of Orthodox classical schools. Here are just a few examples. We've got St. Andrew's Academy in Riverside, California. They launched in 2021, and they now serve over 50 families. The Three Hierarchs Academy in Arizona started in 2018 and has children in grades K through 7. Chrysostom Academy in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania serves 8 Orthodox parishes in the Lehigh Valley area. Farther afield, St. John of Kronstadt Academy opened in 2024 in Brisbane, Australia, and currently has K through 4 classes, and they are adding a grade each year. The St. Constantine School, the oldest of the bunch, opened its doors in 2016 in Houston, Texas. That's their logo over there, the 10 years. They now have over 500 students and 80 staff members. And they opened a Pittsburgh campus in August of 2024 and a Dallas campus in August of 2025. That's pretty big. The young people who graduate from these Christian classical schools do very well academically and socially. The Association of Classical Christian Schools, which is one of the larger organizations supporting this revival, commissioned a study a few years ago to see how their alumni were doing some years after graduating from high school. So this study from 2018 and 2019 shows, as you can see, significant positive differences between alumni of Christian classical schools and those from public schools, private, secular, and Christian schools, and even homeschool children who traditionally do really, really well, and they do. Here we can see that graduates of Christian classical schools were academically successful in post-secondary education. What's interesting to me is that non-academic areas of their lives were also impacted. So the next slide will show you. These graduates are more grateful in life, and they feel less helpless than their peers. So these are just a couple of snaps. There's a lot more to this survey, and you can look it up if you search for Good Soil Report. As with all statistics, take the survey with a grain of salt. I will say, though, that I am not surprised at all to see that students that have been given the kind of education that I will be talking about have a strong work ethic, good study habits, and a rich tradition, both spiritual and philosophical, to draw on when life gets tough and confusing. So, what is this classical Christian or Christian classical education that's getting such amazing results, and how is it different from what most schools are doing now? If you remember, I started this presentation by speaking about the goals of the modern educational institutions. So if modern schools have the wrong goals, what are the right ones? Let me share with you a definition of Christian classical education as given by Andrew Kern, who is one of the leaders of the Christian classical education revival, and an Orthodox Christian, by the way. I'll just read it out loud. Christian classical education is the cultivation of wisdom and virtue by nourishing the soul on the true, the good, and the beautiful, so that your child in Christ can achieve theosis. Let me just read it again. Christian classical education is the cultivation of wisdom and virtue by nourishing the soul on the true, the good, and the beautiful, so that your child in Christ can achieve theosis. The goal is not a career. It is not a set of skills. It's not even knowledge. Not a word about academic excellence. The goal is God. The goal is theosis, deification. When educators have this aim in mind, it's actually very easy to answer a question like, why do I have to do algebra? Because algebra in some way will teach you who God is. Also art and poetry and science and history all will teach you who God is because God is known in his creation. We read in the Bible, the heavens declare the glory of God, and the firmament proclaims his handiwork. That's from the Psalms. Job, ask the animals, and they will teach you, or the birds in the sky, and they will tell you. Or speak to the earth, and it will teach you, or let the fish in the sea inform you. And the Apostle Paul says, for what can be known about God is plain to men, because God has shown it to them. For his invisible attributes, namely his eternal power and divine nature, have been clearly perceived ever since the creation of the world in the things that have been made. So that's why we study everything that we do, to know God better, which really means to fall ever more deeply in love with him. With theosis as the aim of education, it's also easy to explain why we have to do everything to the best of our abilities, why we go beyond good enough. Because we are called to give to God our first fruits, our yearling lamb without blemish. We know that he delights in our sacrifices when we offer them with joy, of our own free will, and with generosity. Ultimately, we are called to imitate Christ, who gave himself for us. So it's not that God needs your child's cursive to be perfect, but rather your child needs to learn to give his best, first in small things, so that later he will be able to do so in bigger things. And here, as we read in Matthew, well done, good and faithful servant. You have been faithful over a little. I will set you over much. Enter into the joy of your master. So now that we've commented on the why, we can examine the how. Let's go back to the earlier definition of Christian classical education for a moment. I want to speak briefly about that triple, the true, the good, and the beautiful. This is where you will see some fundamental, radical differences between the Christian classical education model and the modern-day school. I will be drawing heavily on Stephen R. Turley's wonderful short book, Awakening Wonder, The Classical Guide to Truth, Goodness, and Beauty. I highly recommend it. It's on the table over there. You can't take it, but you can look at it. Turley states that the true, the good, and the beautiful are not concepts that originated in Christian thought. Neither did their grouping. The ancient Greeks first started discussing these concepts and putting them together. To them, the ideal Greek citizen was one whose soul was in harmony with the divine cosmic order, and whose life, by extension, manifested that order. Truth, goodness, and beauty were three distinct but interrelated manifestations of that cosmic reality, and therefore extremely important concepts in the education of young children so that they can become good Greek citizens. To the Greeks, beauty, by definition, awakened a desire, a love in the soul for the true and the good, motivating intellectual, moral, and spiritual pursuits. Beauty, therefore, could not be subjective, because it was only beauty if it awakened that love, that desire. If the desire was not for the true and the good, then whatever prompted it was not beautiful. And the desire itself was not love, but rather lust. The true and the good, in turn, were also not subjective opinions, but, as I said, manifestations of divine reality. And so education involved teaching children or students to repudiate what deserves repudiation and to love what is in fact lovely and deserving of our desires. For us Christians, of course, the creator of the universe, he who is himself truth and goodness, is the object of desire, not some impersonal cosmic order. Turley quotes St. Gregory of Nyssa as representative of the adaptation and transformation that Christians brought to these concepts. St. Gregory draws upon Greek thought, but puts Christ in the center, saying, "Hope always draws the soul from the beauty which is seen to what is beyond, always kindles the desire for the hidden through what is constantly perceived. Therefore, the ardent lover of beauty, although receiving what is always visible as an image of what he desires, yet longs to be filled with the very stamp of the archetype. And the bold request which goes up the mountains of desire asks this, to enjoy the beauty not in mirrors or reflections, but face to face." Why am I talking about this? Why is this important? First, because this means that unlike modern-day educators, Christian classical educators believe and teach that truth is real and that it can be known, not only deductively, but noetically, in the nous, in the eye of the soul. It is not relative, it is not a personal preference, and it does not depend on what is culturally acceptable at any given moment. This belief, in turn, means that in their teaching, Christian classical educators always point to that truth, from what is perceived to what is hidden in order to uncover it. Like the Theotokos in this icon, who does not draw attention to herself, as beautiful as she is, but rather points to Christ, the teachers point through the poem, through the flower, through the geometric figure, to the reality beyond, to Christ, drawing the students into contemplation and enjoyment of divine truth and goodness. To accomplish this, teachers constantly surround the students with beauty in all areas of instruction, in music, in visual arts, in movement, but also in language, mathematics, science, and history. As St. Gregory says, the desire to enjoy beauty face to face should be constantly awakened. Incidentally, this means that students should desire to be in school. They should enjoy learning. This does not mean, of course, that school is meant to be fun. That's a very different kind of enjoyment. And not every moment will be enjoyable, especially because our children's tastes and ours, if we are to be honest, have been corrupted. We've all tasted the Turkish delight of the White Witch, remember? And wholesome food doesn't taste good to us anymore. It might be hard for a child to enjoy Charlotte's Web when he's been reading nothing but Captain Underpants. But ultimately, his soul will recognize what is truly nourishing and respond with joy and satisfaction. So, I'm sure you can see now how everything in a Christian classical school must be ordered to this definition and this ultimate aim. The curriculum structure, the daily schedule, the way lessons are taught, the way books are selected, assessment and homework practices, uniforms and the decor of rooms, and even the way lunch is eaten. And so, let me present to you a proposed curriculum and daily schedule for St. Athanasius Orthodox Academy. I hope you will be able to see that it embodies what we've been discussing so far. Ta-da! Now, you will notice that JK and SK, so that kindergarten classes, do not appear on this table. This is also because there's not enough space, but also because children who are just beginning school need a lot less formal schooling and a lot more playtime. This helps them gently and gradually adjust to the reality of school with increasing periods of concentration, group work, sitting down at desks, etc. So, in kindergarten, children will listen to beautiful stories, poems, and music. They will do hands-on math, science, and art activities that elicit wonder and the desire to know more. They will start learning French through songs and games. They will start reading and writing, holding their pencils properly. They will play a lot because it is the best way to develop social and emotional skills, practice their newly acquired abilities, and mull over new ideas. Starting in grade 1, the curriculum will follow a chronological progression from learning about the ancient world through the Middle Ages, Renaissance, and modern periods, and back to the ancient world in grade 5. Other areas of study, to the extent possible, will connect to this timeline, reflecting the reality of interrelatedness of all knowledge. This is not just an effective learning method, it's also a theological statement. The children will see the world in its wholeness rather than in broken up shards. The physical and the semiotic, nature and culture are brought together. And so you see up at the top that the science curriculum follows along with the history progression. Biology, the human body, and classification of organisms were of primary concern to the ancient peoples. Earth sciences and astronomy really flowered in the Middle Ages, chemistry in the Renaissance, and physics and computer science in the modern period. And then we return to the ancient times and the corresponding science topics in grade 5 in much more depth. This is what's called a spiral curriculum. The fifth graders will already have some knowledge of these topics, so new knowledge will be more easily absorbed, but it's not going to be boring because they will have grown and learned so much in the meantime. It's a little bit like when you reread a really good book after many years and you discover whole new layers of meaning because of how you've changed. Across the disciplines, as well as within each discipline, the curriculum will exhibit another hallmark of classical education, which is the trivium structure. Trivium means 3 paths in Latin. This refers to a particular progression of the curriculum, and it also corresponds beautifully to ways in which children learn best in their various developmental stages. So I'll just briefly explain it here. The grammar stage is the stage of learning the building blocks, so to speak, of any topic or area of knowledge. If you want to learn math, you need to know what numbers are. If you want to read, you need to know what letters look like and what sounds they make. The curriculum at this stage consists mostly of accumulating facts and repeating them through songs, chants, and plain memorization. Unlike the Ontario curriculum, we do not ask children to express themselves just yet, or at least not very much. After all, what can they express if they haven't taken anything in yet? Instead, kids just enjoy feasting on everything that's presented to them. The logic stage takes those building blocks and starts arranging them. This is the stage of arguments, of critical reasoning, and of understanding. This, not earlier, is the time to ask a child, what do you think this character should have done? With a wealth of stories already in his mind, he might actually have something to say, whereas previously the response would have been I don't know. This is where analysis comes in, and students now enjoy probing ideas and questioning their teachers and their parents. Classical Christian schools do not fight this impulse, but rather encourage it in productive ways, so as to learn how to ascertain truth. The rhetoric stage is the expression stage. Now that the students have learned the basics of a topic and the way these building blocks can be arranged in better and worse ways, they learn to craft their own arguments and attempt to persuade others. This is most clearly seen in language studies, but the same can apply in the study of history, where students may justify their interpretation of historical events, mathematics, when they might be given a challenging problem and asked to defend their solution, or art, where they work to convey an idea or a feeling using previously acquired knowledge and skills. The young adult's natural impulse is once again harnessed and utilized to express the truth beautifully for the good of all. Of course, these stages are fuzzy and they overlap, so students in older elementary grades may begin working on rhetorical elements, but for now, our school will focus mainly on the grammar and logic stages. I know this is a lot to take in, but the main point that I would like you to take away is simply that the curriculum is coherent and meaningful, and that it's organized in such a way as to make the most of students' innate, age-appropriate abilities and desires. I do want to take a brief moment to address a question that might be forming in your minds. Perhaps you're thinking, chemistry in 3rd grade? Latin? This feels quite academic. Will this sort of education be right for my child? Obviously, I can't answer this question for you. You know your children better than anybody else. What I can say, though, is that, again, the goal of this model of education, our goal, is theosis. The goal is to nourish your child's soul on the true, the good, and the beautiful. Every child's soul needs to be nourished, whether that child is bookish or sporty, tidy or messy, gifted or developmentally delayed. And so to me, as a teacher, the question really isn't, is this right for this child, but rather, how do we make this right for this child? How do we nourish this child's soul? I would also suggest that you do not underestimate the effect of the school environment. What your child currently demonstrates in school and at home may be the result of spending the better part of a day in a classroom of at least 20 students, herded by the teacher from one unrelated subject to another, while being constantly made aware of looming assessments. I know, I have a kid in grade 3, EQAOs, all the time. You may be pleasantly surprised by the way your child responds to a prayerful, studious, beautiful, humanized environment. I've seen that happen, anecdotally speaking. As a teacher, I've seen children change drastically when they encounter a different kind of an environment. Now, to show you what this kind of environment may be like in practice, let me go over a sample school day. Let's say you do send your children to St. Athanasius Orthodox Academy. What do they actually do from the moment they walk in and until they get picked up? There's our daily schedule. So at 8:45 or so, the kids enter the school, they put away their coats, their backpacks, they submit their homework, they chat with their friends. The walls are hung with artwork. There's music playing. There are plants in each room. There's a map of the world prominently displayed somewhere so that they actually know where the continents are. Yes, I know. At 9 o'clock, all the classes gather at the prayer area for the morning assembly. We sing hymns, we read the lives of the saints of the day, we recite selections from Psalms to memorize them. Everything is guided by the liturgical calendar, of course. At 9:25, the students head to their classroom, each with a teacher and an assistant. Every classroom is a split grade on purpose. This promotes cooperation between older and younger students. It fosters a sense of responsibility in the older students and a desire to step up in the younger ones. The kids have a snack while the teacher goes over the schedule for the day, any announcements, daily riddles, etc., etc. Language block time starts at 9:45. During this block, the children may do any combination of the following activities: short presentations about familiar topics to develop their rhetorical skills, small group work on grammar, spelling, French, or Latin. They may practice printing, cursive, or do handiwork like knitting or embroidery, which is excellent for fine motor skills, and it's fun. They may work on reading fluency and comprehension one-on-one with a teacher using a phonics-based method that was originally created for children with dyslexia, but actually works beautifully for everyone. They may listen to myths, stories, poems, and novels that tie into the historical timeline, and they may jointly recite and memorize poetry and Bible verses. So, just visualize this for a second. We've got a group of students working here with a teacher on, let's say, spelling. There are spelling rules. I know it's hard to believe, but English does have spelling rules, and you can learn to read and write better if you know them. So there's a small group working over here. The other students are sitting at their desks doing their individual work. If they are finished, they know that they have another activity that they can move on to. The assistant is circulating to help them if they need any help or if they're encountering any issues, and to guide them as well. It's a sort of a fluid environment, but also everyone knows what they have to do. It's something that we develop over time. There's a lot of choice, right? So let's say you're finished with one thing, you can choose to stay with more cursive if that's what you want to do. If you're done with your cursive and you want to work on a different art project that you were working on before, that's okay as well. So whatever it is that you want, you're not going to be tugged away by the next thing that we're going to be doing. It's quite a long block, as you can see. Then it's recess. As the Scandinavians say, there is no such thing as bad weather, only bad clothes. So if it's at all possible, we go outside, making sure that everyone is dressed appropriately, of course. Physical activity outdoors is crucial for kids for a multitude of reasons, including, amazingly, something that I just learned, that trees release particles that help boost the immune system. God really did think of everything. When we come back inside, we pray and eat together as a school, rotating weekly serving assignments to all student ages, even the little ones in kindergarten. The younger ones might hand out napkins or pour water for everyone. The older ones might wipe the tables and sweep the floors afterwards. This way, the children learn to serve each other so that later they can serve the world. At 1 p.m., we head back to class for the mathematics block. Once again, we go back to that fluid movement of groupings and individual work. The kids will recite the times tables together, they memorize definitions and formulas, they gather in small groups to get instruction from the teacher, then they go on to practice the new concept in their individual workbooks. And if you want to take a look at the math curriculum that I've been using with my kid, it's on the table over there, and it is really fantastic. Like, my daughter actually wants to do math. Wow. It's designed in such a way that the students who are ready to move more quickly can complete more than one lesson a day because they're so incremental. Whereas students that need extra support or more practice can get more individualized attention. And the assistant will check and mark workbooks daily so a child never gets too far behind before any challenges are identified and addressed. So no falling through the cracks and all of a sudden realizing in grade 6 that you don't actually know multiplication. And of course, the math skills learned during math class will be later applied in activities that tie into the historical timeline. So we might measure the perimeter of the Great Pyramid of Giza, or we might analyze the 3D shapes that make up the Pantheon. It's meaningful tie-ins. It's not just, well, we're learning subtraction, so, 5 pyramids minus 3 pyramids, right? No, it's actually meaningful. Good job. Yeah, show off, right? After another quick snack and outdoor recess, it's time for the last learning block of the day. This is where the historical timeline progression is most evident. The kids will listen to and read about exciting events from history, including stories from the Bible, of course. They will locate these events on maps. They will create arts and crafts that teach about particular cultures and time periods. They will learn about scientific and cultural developments that took place at those times. They might stage a play or learn songs or do a dance, etc., etc. The goal really is to make history come alive through all of our senses. We're listening to it, we're reading about it, we're seeing it, we're touching it, we're even smelling it and tasting it. And it works. Honestly, it works. Again, on the table, you will find 4 volumes. It's called The Story of the World. I'm reading through the first one with my daughter right now, and she asks to read more about history. So honestly, I think it works. The Ontario curriculum, on the other hand, doesn't teach any history, as far as I can tell, until grade 3, and then it just plonks the kids into 17th and 18th century Canada with just no background. So what are they supposed to make of it? Finally, at 3:45, it's the end of the school day. The kids put away their materials, they wipe their desks, they pick up any large pieces of garbage off the floor. We all take care of our space and keep it beautiful. And we finish the day with prayers and singing. So I hope this overview gave you a bit of a sense of what the school will be like. As you can see, it's a busy and bustling place, but it's also a place that gives kids enough time to engage deeply in a task without being pulled away by the next subject that needs to be covered. I don't like that word. Keep in mind, this is a sample day. The schedule is flexible. If there's a concert or an art exhibit that we think the kids will really benefit from, we're just going to go. I also hope to have at least half day a week, maybe a full day, in nature, learning to know and love God's creation in all its variety and glory. In everything that we do, we keep the ultimate goal in our minds and in our hearts, theosis. If I accomplished what I set out to do, right now you are wondering why we would ever educate our children any other way. I know I certainly can't imagine teaching any other way. And yet, while the United States has a number of Orthodox classical schools, Canada does not. There are some pan-Christian, Catholic, and Protestant classical schools, including a couple in the GTA, but no Orthodox classical schools that I could find. So St. Athanasius Orthodox Academy may well be the first Orthodox classical school in Canada. And providentially, because of the incredible growth in demand for Christian classical education, there are now a number of organizations that support school building, accreditation, and teacher training, and they're creating more and more helpful materials, workshops, webinars, textbooks, even whole curricula. And you might find actually some of them are on the table there as well. Take a look at those lesson plans. They're quite incredible, and they're very different from what you might see in a public school system or even in the Catholic school system. So it really truly is a wonderful time to be opening an Orthodox classical school. And I also believe that it is a crucial time, especially now with the world around us descending further into chaos and violence each and every day. I hope and pray that many of you can join this work so that together, with our bishop's blessing and by God's grace, we can form a place of joyful learning where all the glory and honor are given to God, as it is meet and right. Thank you.
I won't take too much time here. I am tremendously proud of the efforts that this committee, under the leadership of Polina, have brought together. You can already see that this is more than just a project, as it were, but it's something beloved from the heart. It's something that the people who are involved in truly care and believe in. And I want to just highlight just a few things, if I could. If one thinks about what is our motivation for doing this, I think that if you could understand that, then you would see the value in what it is that is being proposed here. Nobody that will be working at the school or is involved in the school will be driving away in their Lamborghini, except for me, however. Yes. This is basically by Father Paul Lamborghini. Obviously, what it is such deep, sincere care to raise our children, not just the children of this parish, but actually more broadly, of the Orthodox community, and even more broadly of truly anyone who would see value in this. If somebody would love to bring their child all the way from a background that is completely foreign to Orthodoxy, may it be blessed. The motivation is we see there are people here that have a heart to want to love children and to teach them, to raise them in a way that is healthy for their whole person. When one thinks about what the church had done or has done since the resurrection of Christ, it's been the furtherance of making saints in this world, of, as Polina had said, theosis, to want to give our young people an opportunity to have their whole life be commended unto Christ our God, and not just aspects of their life part-time when it works. Every Sunday we'll commend those hours unto Christ our God, but really throughout the week we'll just sort of have them be with any old person, and sort of maybe they become a bit more discombobulated in that way. This school initiative is entirely, as I said, it's a non-for-profit. And as Polina had pointed out at the end, we have the blessing of our bishop, His Eminence Metropolitan Gregory. This is an initiative of our diocese, which is open broadly to many other people of any background. So it's not just sort of this thing that we're pulling up from our own creation. It has a lot of backing and a lot of support. Another thing that I would want to highlight here, as I had said, a lot of the work that's done by many of the servants of this church surrounds the idea of commending our whole life unto Christ, as I had said. And we see this in the personality of St. Athanasius, who is a whole person and who is wholly for God. You get that in his writings, and as Father Timothy had pointed out in his book on the Incarnation. When you read that book, you end up seeing a person who was more than just a scholar, but was entirely a father. If this book were republished under another name, it would be Why God So Loves the World. And then it would be him setting out, proving that. And why does he need to prove that? So that all those people who might think otherwise could be convinced. We want our children to be raised as whole people, not fragmented people. Not by people who are only paid to take care of them for certain hours, but people who love them and care for them deeply. And we even want that from our staff. Our staff would also be attempting to proceed in a means towards theosis. They would also be people who would be enriched by what is going on surrounding them. Just to point out, a school like this would have many things that would be tied to it. We have an opportunity to also, being that it's part of our diocese, to tie it to Camp Nazareth. Should there be an opportunity, we have what Camp Nazareth is, for those of you that don't know, is we have a diocesan camp down south, which is fully staffed and has many opportunities for outdoor education that's also in the bosom of the church. There's a whole chapel there, and it's just tremendously beautiful. We also have just recently begun to rebuild connections with the Hermitage that's in Combermere, Ontario, of St. John the Baptist. And we have opportunities to also use these places as also spiritual centers or places for education and continued growth. Having a school here in such a context would give us opportunities for pastoral care, an integrated prayer life, academics that would be more than just, as you heard, discombobulated, but actual academics that could be unto the edification of the whole person and inquiry. There would be social and play, not just with people that are sort of disconnected from them, but in a family setting, around teachers who would actually care for the well-being of the children. Something as a parent that sometimes I see with my children in school is just how distant the teachers can be from the children. At best, sometimes they can be professional, but to really truly care, that's something completely foreign that I don't know that any place other than a school like this could offer. And ultimately, what I would want, even for my own children, who we would send here, would be that they could concretely grow in the virtues of holiness, of sainthood, that they would come to understand charity and love at the two tables of the Lord that our parish is attempting to work at setting up. We have, of course, the altar, which is the table of the Lord, and then we also, on Mondays, and hope to continue to expand through our Noble Joseph hours, we have a table to our brother and sister, the forgotten, the poor, the stranger, the one who is perhaps not known to the rest of us. And we would have our children, as we already do, integrated in the life of both these tables. That the education wouldn't just be separate from that, but that they would actually have an opportunity to grow in concrete works of mercy towards a path of theosis, where they're leading the prayers under the guidance of the pastoralship here, where they're also creating ideas, or rather finding a mutual relationship with the brother who comes and sits at the tables here. You want to see more of this, I would invite you to come and see what we do on Monday nights. See what the children do here on Monday nights. It's a bit of a kind of sampling of what could happen at St. Athanasius Academy. This is our prayer, this is our vision, and I don't know a better one. If you do, please let me know. Bam. I bet you don't, and we'll talk about it at home. We'll talk about it at home. Okay, stop. Yeah. So that's all I wanted to say. I really thank very much Polina, Miriam, Vanessa, Peter, Father Timothy, Fotini, and Shayna. We actually have this is a pretty high caliber group of people working at this. Sometimes I feel out of my depth. So you should know that what's being created here is going to be pretty stellar. Go and tell your friends. Yeah.
You shone forth with works of orthodoxy and quenched all heresy, and became victorious tropher bearers, hierarchs Athanasius and Cyril. You enriched all things with piety and greatly adorned the church, and worthily found Christ God, who grants his great mercy.